This is a really cute way how to make your very own Polaroid magnets for your fridge or any surface that you can add magnets to. So the first thing that I did was I actually went into my Photoshop application and I found a Polaroid image on Google and I just duplicated it 8 times, and then I went to Pinterest and found a couple of images and just screenshot them into square shapes, just images that I personally liked. And I also did one of myself just to show you guys the different variations you can go for. I popped the images on the inside of each of the Polaroids there and I printed it out as shown. And next what you're going to want to do is just cut them out using an X-Acto knife. So I just cut around all of the edges, making sure that each of my little Polaroids was its own image, and just kind of making sure to cleanly cut each of the Polaroid pieces because we are going to be adding these onto a foam sheet next, which is kind of going to elevate them and just make them a bit more substantial. So I went ahead and I cut down different foam squares for each of our little magnets, and I glued on top of it our printed out piece of paper, and that really finishes off the base of our magnet. Super simple and very, very easy. The last step in creating these magnets is just to apply a little magnet on the back side. I just use these little circle ones from the craft store, and you can hang these up on your fridge or wherever you'd like. Here is another anthropology-inspired project that I saw online. It was about $60 to $100 per piece, so I picked up this woven placemat at Target for just under $5 and used a little bit of macrame cord, and I cut them into 6-inch strips and used a crochet hook to weave them on the outside of the entire ring of this placemat. This is just a very repetitive process of looping through our macrame cording around the entire exterior of this piece, trimming it once you're completely done, and then what you're going to actually do is unravel the entire strand of macrame cording. It's kind of like a rope, so it is pretty easy to go in there and kind of unravel it a little bit, and then you get the individual fibers, which I used a little pair of tweezers to just kind of brush out. And once you're completely done with that, you can again spray some hairspray on these if you want them to stand up a little bit more straight, add a loop on the back side to hang it on the wall, and that finishes off this wall decor. This is a super easy hack to make your very own sea glass vessels. So I got a couple of glass vases from the dollar store, and I'm going to be mixing some Elmer's glue with just some basic food coloring to create basically a colored Elmer's glue. And all you have to do from here on out is actually just paint this on the exterior of your glass vessel. And once it dries down, it's going to end up being such a pretty matte color. So I ended up applying just a decent amount of glue and then adding in a couple drops of food coloring. Do keep in mind that it's going to be pretty translucent, but once it dries, you're really going to be able to see that color. For this first one here, I just did a nice minty green shade, and for our second one, I added some more Elmer's glue into a Dixie cup, and I just went ahead and I did a blue sea glass, which I love the way that this one turned out. I went ahead and I applied a nice coat on the outside of our vessel, and then you're just gonna let them dry, and once they are dry, they look super cute like this. Back with another IKEA hacks, I'm going to be using this basket, which is the Snidad basket from IKEA, and I'm going to also be using the Hema light cord. So the additional supplies are just a wire cutter and some hemp cord. So the first thing I wanted to do on this basket was actually remove the handles because I want to turn it into a pendant light as opposed to a basket. So I just cut off these little raffia strands on the side there, pulled out the handle, which was just kind of nail gunned in. And once you have both of those handles removed, we're going to be flipping it over so that way we can create an opening on the bottom for our light cord. So I just went ahead and I actually cut diagonal across from each other out some of those little sections. So I went ahead and I cut this one out, I cut a little bit higher than that, and then directly across from that I did the same exact method of cutting them out. So I had 2 open holes here that I was then able to string my light cord through and kind of tie it onto that middle intersection and allow my light to hang in the middle and also me hang it from the ceiling there. So I just dropped through my light cord, wrapped it around, tied it on the inside there, as you can see, in just a simple little knot, and then I strung it back out the top. That way I was able to hang it up. Just insert your light bulb and that finishes off this pendant light. When it comes comes to shelf styling, I love these kind of geometric brass or just metal objects. I think they're so much fun. So I ended up creating my very own using these wind twisters from the dollar store. This is what they look like originally. They are so ugly, but I actually glued a couple of them together to start, and I used a wooden dowel as kind of the base for our little structure. So I'm going to be sticking that through, applying some hot glue, and just hot gluing down our wind twister onto it. But do not worry, we are not going to be leaving this rainbow. We're actually going to transfer it outside and spray the entire thing with a brass or whatever color spray paint you want to put on there. I ended up opting for brass just because I feel like it gave it a very kind of unique and cohesive look. And then of course we needed to create a base for our sculpture. So I got this little wood cube at Michael's, and I'm going to be covering it with some marble contact paper just to make it look a little bit more luxury and high end. And I just kind of did this how you would a present. I just cut off different edges and made sure it was nice and flush. Created another one, just a matte black box, to give you guys options so you can kind of see what it would look like. And once I had both of my box pedestal bases, I just drilled a hole down the center of them, which I could then go in and apply the stick with a little bit of hot glue so that our sculptures can stand up. So I piped in a decent amount of hot glue, pressed my stick on the inside, just made sure it was standing upright, and do not worry about this at all. It is super lightweight, so it's not going to topple over, and that finishes off our brass sculptural objects. If you're into geometric shapes and 3D art, this one is perfect for you. So I basically went ahead and I grabbed these little wooden dowels here that I got at Michael's, and I'm going to be creating some pyramids out of these. So I actually, again, work on parchment paper for these kinds of projects. That way I can easily peel them off once I am done. So I believe that I ended up creating about 7 of these pyramid shapes, and I'm going to be painting 3 of them pink because we are also going to be going onto our canvas and taping off a diagonal section, which we are also going to be painting that same exact pink color. So on the smaller side, we're going to be painting the pink side and adding 3 of our little pyramids that we also painted pink onto that side. On the opposite side, we're going to be adding just our wood pyramids just opposite that, and that really finishes off this art piece. It's super simple, but also very fun. When the moon mirror became popular on TikTok, one of the most requested projects I created was this moon mirror. So I figured I'd go out and grab a circular shaped mirror, some joint compound, and get to work. So basically for this project, what you're going to want to do is kind of map out where you want your moon shape to be on the right side of your mirror there, and spread a decently thick amount of joint compound on that section. I probably did a 1/4 inch, but you can vary it and make it thicker in some sections. I believe that also gives it a little bit more texture. And next, what you could see me doing is actually going in with a sea sponge, and I'm going to go ahead and just create some nice texture throughout the area. And lastly, you're going to want to go in with a squirt bottle and just spray vigorously in spots to create craters in your moon. I used some paper towels to just absorb any excess water and went back in with my spatula just to smooth out some sections and add some more joint compound to other sections to kind of create an elevated look. You're going to want to let this dry overnight, and as the joint compound dries, it actually cracks a little bit, which I think gives even more texture and dimension to the moon shape. So what I'm going to be doing next is mixing up a little bit of brown acrylic paint with some white to create kind of an off-whitish color, which I'm going to go ahead and paint my entire moon shape with just to give it a full coat of one solid color. And then I'm also going back in with a little bit of diluted brown and just some other whites and spray paints, whatever I want to add in here just to kind of add texture, and that finishes off your moon mirror. This next project is actually one of the most current projects that I've posted on my channel. It is how I took this Ivar shelf side unit and turned it into a blanket ladder. So basically on the inside of the shelf unit, you can see that there are a ton of different holes which allow you to adjust your shelves as you'd like, but I just went ahead and every other hole I actually drilled through all the way to the opposite side because I wanted to be able to add lacing to the sides of this ladder just to give it a little bit more detail than just staining it as is. So that's exactly what I did. I also cut off the very bottom middle post, brought it outside, gave it a nice sanding to ensure that there were no splintered edges and that everything was nice and smooth, and I took out my classic black wood stain and gave it a full coat of this stain all the way around using a foam brush. You could totally apply it with whatever you'd like, a paper towel, a foam brush, and just let that dry outside for a full-on day. I especially say this for the black color because the black one seems to actually kind of bleed in some areas, so the more time you give it to dry, the better. I then grabbed some macrame cording and applied some tape to the end of them. This kind of makes a makeshift needle. material and just makes it a little bit easier for you to string that cording through the side there. Now, all I did on either side was just create X's on both the outside and the inside, crossing over my macrame cord as I worked my way down to the bottom, and I just really like the way that this added a nice little detail to the side. I think it would also be really cute with some leather cording, and that finishes off your blanket ladder. For our next project, we are jumping into something a little bit more intermediate when it comes to macrame. I know some of the earlier projects were a bit more simple, but what I'm going to start off by doing is just cutting some long strands, 6-foot strands, and you're going to need 8 of them. I then went ahead and tied all 8 strands into a knot, and this is going to be our very bottom section, so I suggest that you kind of separate them in sections of 2 and create a plus sign with your macrame cord. Now, what you're going to start off by doing is creating a sequence of square knots once again, which is just right over left and then left over right. That's how you create a simple square knot, and I just made these probably about 2 inches from our base section. So we kind of have this little flower shape. Then grabbing neighboring strands, you're going to do the same exact thing, creating a square knot with 2 neighboring strands about the same distance that you created with your first ones from the center knot, and just make sure that they're as even as possible. This will just make your macrame look a lot better in the end. I placed my bowl on top to get an idea of how much more I would need to macrame upwards, and for this next section, I probably went up about 6 inches and created another square knot here. So as you can see, applying my next round of square knots, and then we're going to be doing a little bit of macrame, which is basically just constant right over left, left over right to create these little sections, and that finishes off your macrame planter. Now, this project was a really fun texture that I kind of recreated using some of this lightweight spackle from the dollar store. I also used this glass vessel as well, also from the dollar store. But basically, I scooped out this spackling material, and it almost has this like moon sand kind of a feeling to it. It feels almost like clay, but it's not too wet, but it's also dry. It just has a very odd texture. So I figured, why don't I try going ahead and applying this to the entire exterior of one of these glass vases and creating almost like a stone finish vase. And this piece only cost me around $3 to create. I used 2 full canisters of that spackling mixture. I also went ahead and applied it on the inside top rim. Once it dries down, it looks like this.